I'm on. Hey everyone, Mel here. Mel as in the witch from the Evanscape. I haven't been here in a while. Not that you will miss me, but why am I here? Right. So, in search of the Black Byronic hero, a bit of a ramble. So recently I came across a video on YouTube from a vlogger that I really enjoy. And the video was a brief, I guess, video summary of Byronic heroes and their general appeal. So the idea of the Byronic hero. So the idea of the Byronic hero was said to have originated with Lord Byron, the famous poet who lived, I believe, between 1788 and 1824. Lord Byron himself wrote numerous characters in his famous Harold Pilgrimage poems, and he himself was said to have embodied this character, who is also sometimes described as an anti-hero, antisocial, reclusive, a rebel. And another example, perhaps one of the most famous examples of the Byronic hero in literature, is arguably Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights, who I've argued went from a romantic hero in the first half of the book to a gothic villain in the second half, although it can be argued that man was wronged. There's also Mr. Rochester in Jane Eyre, Max de Winter in Rebecca, which itself is almost a spiritual twin of Jane Eyre. There's Edward Cullen in the Twilight series. There is Christian Grey in 50 Shades of Grey. And the list goes on. The Byronic hero is usually, he can be found in romantic and or gothic fiction. Often romantic gothic fiction. He's usually a dark and brooding, mysterious figure, prone to wearing black. He is often good looking. He is often wealthy, self-isolated, a recluse if you must. He tends to be very intellectual. He's often harboring some sort of deep, dark secret and is often tortured by it. Sometimes he expressed that torture outward or inward. Vampires are often Byronic hero types. Louis in Interview with the Vampire, Angel in Buffy are examples of this, and of course the aforementioned Edward Cullen. There are a lot of Byronic heroes. Some of my modern favorites I just mentioned, Christian Grey, but there's also the lead character in the Boys Over Flowers / Meteor Garden series on Netflix. He has different names because the series has been adapted into different Asian cultures. So Boys Over Flower is the Korean name, and Meteor Garden is the Chinese name of the show. But nonetheless, the lead male character is in fact a Byronic hero through and through. Which brings me to the point. I have not seen any black Byronic heroes, and I don't know why. Where is the Black Byronic hero? In search of the Black Byronic hero. And the only version of this character I've never seen is a black version. Of course, I partly blame this on the lack of complexity that black characters are given or not given in literature and modern fiction, movies, TV shows, name your pick. That's probably the main reason. I myself have written about the Byronic hero. Of course, Devin Locuskin in my duology Winter Haven and North Island is a romantic Byronic hero in a modern version, the bad boy offshoot. At the time, I had no idea what a Byronic hero was. I was a 16-year-old girl who was reading a lot of Regency romances, who was watching the old school 90210, Dylan McKay, rest in peace. Winter Haven specifically was inspired by a novel I had read at the time, a teen romance called The Girl Who Wanted a Boy. And so this Byronic hero, bad boy, was fresh in my mind without even me understanding it. But of course, this was the period in my life when I was just starting to read Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre and all the classics. So the character was born from everything I was reading at the time, just to show you how embedded in our consciousness this and our literature this character is, that I was able to jot down all the traits of this character without even consciously thinking about it. When my protagonist Tyler meets Devin for the first time, he is in the midst of a nightmare. So he has all the traits. He's dark and brooding, mysterious, an heir to an affluent fortune, and he is suffering from trauma. And that's when she meets him, and he's literally in the middle of a nightmare about this trauma, which later comes to light. There are rumors about him. He keeps to himself. He's a recluse. He has a motorcycle. He has all the traits of a Byronic hero, and I was able to write him without even understanding what a Byronic hero was. But the thing about Devin McCuskey is he is not black. He's described as having dark brooding features, and later it's credited to his indigenous ancestry that he didn't realize he had, but he is not black. And that's cool, that's all right. But recently seeing this video in which Killmonger from Black Panther was included as a black Byronic hero, I was a little bit taken back, because I can't help but feel that the inclusion of Killmonger was in fact designed to compensate for the blatant lack of black Byronic hero types. Of course, there's a different argument about whether or not we should be glorifying the Byronic hero, because in many cases, such as Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights, he is in fact a gothic villain who is ridiculous. Christian Grey and Edward Cullen, for example, have engaged in stalking. And but that's a different argument. The fact is, the Byronic hero is a fixture of literature, past and now. Now he's just called a bad boy, but he usually has the same traits. So where's the black version of him? I haven't found any, and admittedly, I'm sure one or two might exist, but the closest I've come in looking is in fact Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights, and George, Alexander Dumas's George. If I turn this upside down, will you see? How does this never work? But Alexander Dumas's George is an example. You can see the cover here, but here they're using a visibly white guy, I suppose, and even though George passes for white, he's clearly described as mulatto, which is the source of his grievance. And in the same way that Rebecca is a kind of spiritual homage to Jane Eyre, George and Heathcliff have much in common, and these two are the closest to the black Byronic hero that I can think of. Heathcliff is described in Wuthering Heights as being everything from a gypsy, a lascar, and a Moor. In other words, he's ethnically ambiguous. The general theory I've seen regarding Heathcliff's heritage, and the one that's generally accepted by the Bronte Society, is that Heathcliff may very well have been the child of a black mulatto woman living in Liverpool, which, if you look at the history of Liverpool and the census, this makes perfect sense. I've also seen some theory suggesting that he may also be the son of Mr. Earnshaw, Catherine's dad, but that one is a little bit more controversial. But the general theory is that Heathcliff is the child of a mulatto woman, which would make a lot of sense for his ethnically ambiguous features, which causes him a lot of grief in the world of Wuthering Heights, and sadly in a racist way attributed to his bad temper. But Heathcliff is the closest I know. A few years back, maybe 2011-12, there was a production of Wuthering Heights in which the actor who portrayed Heathcliff was a biracial black man, and that caused a lot of controversy. It was not a good version of Wuthering Heights, and I My disagreement with the actor in the role was not that he was biracial. It was more that he didn't have an ambiguous look to him, which I believe Heathcliff should have had. So Heathcliff's whole deal is that you don't know what his ethnicity is, a gypsy, a Moor, a Lascar, you don't know. And so they could have cast someone slightly more ethnically ambiguous to play Heathcliff. But that was the whole film that got the ball rolling on Heathcliff, the controversy of his ethnicity. And as I said, the Bronte Society has officially kind of accepted Heathcliff as a mixed race man, which for Liverpool would make a lot of sense. But that would be the closest to a black Byronic hero, Heathcliff, who started out as a romantic hero and then became a romantic or a gothic villain later in the story, not exactly anything to glorify. Which brings me to George, another example of this, a mixed race. Unlike Heathcliff, whose ethnicity is just described as ambiguous, George is explicitly described as mulatto. George is the brainchild of Alexandre Dumas. People, of course, know The Man in the Iron Mask, The Three Musketeers, but not many people know about George. And I have to wonder, and George kind of is the predecessor. It was published before a lot of these other books by him, and it's the only book that deals explicitly with race. And the character is not unlike Dumas himself, who was a man of at least 1/4 Black African heritage, and who was generally accepted in French upper class society, but who maybe harbored some resentment toward them over his heritage. And this was the book that kind of deals with his heritage explicitly. The story is about a mulatto man on Mauritius, which at the time was colonized by France, who, after a racialized incident of disrespect, leaves for France, where he sets out on a revenge mission against the white upper class of the island. And while in France, he becomes perfect, for lack of a better word. He becomes highly educated, worldly, handsome, athletic, and very sophisticated. And when he returns to the island, no one recognizes him as the mulatto boy that he was when he was younger. And that triggers a series of events. He comes there with a revenge mission to avenge the disrespect of his father, his brother, and his family, and what they went through when he was a teenager on the island. So again, not unlike Heathcliff, who went away after a brutal incident as a teenager, a kind of horrible incident as a teenager, and then came back wealthy and powerful with revenge on his mind to punish these upper class white people who treated him so badly. Same idea. In this case, however, George sets out to lead a slave rebellion against the whites on the island and is determined to do this. So even after he's avenged his family personally, gotten the white woman of his dreams, it's not enough for him. He wants to take down the white people of the island and sets out to do so. And his way of doing so is basically leading a slave rebellion. It doesn't go as planned because he's betrayed by one of the jealous slaves, and ultimately he is rescued from hanging by his brother, who's now a pirate, and he and his fiancée sets off to freedom. And it ends on that note. But George is it has romance, but it's not necessarily romance, and it's not necessarily gothic. He's a Byronic hero, and like Heathcliff, the closest example to a black Byronic hero you can find. There's a photo here, but it's not of George. The cover shows George, but the photo is supposedly of Dumas himself. You can see he's portrayed as being mulatto looking with curly hair, but this could easily have been George. Anyway, These are the only two examples I can think of, or the closest to Black Byronic heroes I can think of, George and Heathcliff. So yeah. Anyway, if you know any other examples of the Black Byronic hero, please let me know. I would love to read one, and maybe one day I will write a proper Black Byronic hero story. But in the meantime, you can read George, you can pick up this great classic and read Wuthering Heights, and also Winter Haven. Yeah, I'm plugging my own tooting my own horn. Toot toot. Winter Haven is available, of course, wherever books are sold online. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'll talk to you another time.